live in a second. Thank you. And I think we're ready to kick things off.
All right, Remy, will you share the slides and kick us off, and then Karina and I will go from there.
Sorry, everyone. I forgot that I was kicking everyone off. Classic. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Infant Early Childhood Suspension and Expulsion Prevention Model Program, RAC, Rulemaking Advisory Committee. We colloquially just call it the Suspension and Expulsion RAC because, as you can tell, that was a really long list of words that I just used. So Suspension and Expulsion RAC, and thank you so much to everyone for being here. We have seriously such an amazing group of people. You all represent different areas of Oregon. You all represent different different external partner groups who have like different viewpoints, and we've got a lot of people. Oh, excuse me, I've got some dogs in the background. And we're really excited to have you all here at the table. So thank you again for being here. And let me just get started on the PowerPoint. So here we go. I guess the next thing I want to do is introduce our facilitators. So you all know me, I'm the rule coordinator here at the Early Learning Division. I'm the one you've been in contact with about this kind of stuff. Carrie McCann and Karina Guzman-Ortiz are my very valued colleagues who will be facilitating this process, and I'd like to introduce them. And why don't I start with Karina, because Karina is one of our colleagues at ELD and the partner engagement specialist. And please introduce yourself, Karina.
Thank you, Remy, and hi to the pups. Hi, everyone. Karina Guzman-Ortiz, she, her, hers pronouns. I'm with the Early Learning Division, and my title here is Partner Engagement Specialist. I am so excited to be joining you all, and I'll be one of the facilitators along with Carrie as we move through these conversations, these RAC conversations. So we have, again, like Remy mentioned, some content area experts and other ELD folks who are here as support as well. But Carrie and I will have the honor of just guiding us, getting us through the agenda, moving conversations, trying to facilitate the dialogue and keeping us goal-oriented. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And Carrie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Carrie McCann. I'm from the Build Initiative. We're a nonprofit who works with states on early childhood system building. Oregon is one of our partner states. And in that work, I've developed an expertise in what states are doing around the country around trying to prevent and reduce expulsion and suspension in early childhood. It's really my honor to join you in this process and hear the conversation in Oregon and the kinds of things that you're trying to do on behalf of supporting children, families, and providers. And we'll be happy to facilitate your conversations and capture everything that you recommend.
Remy, if you want to move over to the agenda slide, we can kind of get started there. So we will go ahead and here just wanted to quickly share what we have on the agenda for today. We do have 2 hours ahead of us. So do encourage folks to take eye breaks if needed, take your bio breaks as needed. It would be really helpful for us to have people with their cameras on as much as possible. Of course, we understand that it's not always possible, but it just really helps us better interact and helps us stay engaged with each other. And we also want to just encourage folks to use the little raise your hand feature on Zoom or type in any questions or comments into the chat as we move forward. So just kind of wanted to set that framework, but we'll move through with introductions for, with each other, go over the purpose of the RAC for the Suspension and Expulsion Prevention Program, move on to facilitation of principles and group agreements. Fourth, their discussion regarding the suspension and expulsion in early care and education. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up with what comes next, what comes for our next meetings. We will have a quick 5-minute break at the hour mark, but again, we just encourage you all to take care of yourselves as needed. And it's the neat thing about these virtual spaces that we have folks from several places and people can kind of just run to the kitchen and grab their tea like I usually do if needed. So again, just want to really welcome everyone. And with that, let's move on to, I'm going to try to kind of keep an eye on the chat. I'm not always the most efficient, so I'm looking to see what's here. Okay. Unless we have any questions about the agenda, any questions so far? What to expect yet? All right. I'm going to practice my pauses. Well, not seeing anything so far. So let's go ahead and move on to introductions. We have a large group of people here who we're super excited to have. And just as we get settled into this first meeting, we would like to go around the virtual room and have everyone introduce themselves. This will be the first of a couple conversations. So we don't expect people to memorize each other or their roles, but we more than anything want to highlight the knowledge that we have in this shared space and the broad representation that we have from across the state as well. So I'll go ahead and call people based on how names appear on my screen. And if you could please share your name, your pronouns if comfortable with, your role, that might be a couple roles, right? Parent, educator, whatever you want to share. And then where is it that you are joining us from? That could be your city or your county. Just really want to highlight where folks are joining us from. And if we're all okay with that, I can kick us off again and then just pass it on to who's on my screen. And I can kind of go ahead and just copy this over onto the chat so folks know. What are we sharing again? And it's kind of sloppy, but it's there. All right, so my name Karina, she, her, hers. I am early learning partner engagement specialist. I'm a mother of two. And I live in Salem, so Marion County for me. And with that, I'll pass it on to Lauren Siegmann.
Hello, I'm Lauren Siegmann. I'm the early learning coordinator for medium-sized school district on the Oregon coast. I also serve on the governing board for one of the early learning hubs. So I'm an educator and administrator and also a parent. And my pronouns she, her, and I am in Lincoln City in Lincoln County.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Lydia.
Hi, my name is Lydia Gray Holyfield. My pronoun is Queen, and I am a parent, and I am in Portland, Oregon. And do you want me to pass it to someone else?
I'll move on to Dominic while my dog jumps on my back.
Hello, my name is Dominika Paz. I am currently a mentor, coach, and outreach coordinator for the ELSI Early Learning System Initiative at Oregon State University. I am also a parent as well.
Thank you,
Excited
Dominic.
to be here with everybody.
Thank you. Martina?
Hi, everybody. My name is Martina Kuda. Pronouns she, her, hers. I am a quality improvement specialist for Washington County, bilingual in Arabic, along with other languages, but that is the main one. I'm happy to be here. I'm also a parent.
Thank you. Amy?
Hi everyone, I'm Amy True. I use she, her pronouns. I work at Children's Institute, which is an early childhood advocacy organization, and I'm calling in from Portland. I just want to clarify my role here is to support community participation. So Children's Institute is not a member of the RAC. I am not a member of the RAC. I will not be weighing in as a member of the RAC. I'm helping with staff support, so I will be taking notes, that sort of thing. So I'm happy to, I saw Remy's note a minute ago, I'm happy to take myself off camera as well, just to distinguish. And at any point, if I should be on camera or should be part of discussion, just let me know. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Amy. Marcia.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcia Laverne, and I'm the Executive Director of Family Development Center, which is a relief nursery here in rural Douglas County. I am also a parent to 4 and a Mimi to 4. And in my free time, I am a parent educator and do some infant toddler mental health consulting.
Welcome. Molly.
Hi, my name is Molly Williamson. I have to apologize. I had a little unexpected mouth surgery yesterday, so I'm a little, if I sound a little funny or don't share a lot today, that is because. Anyway, my name is Molly Williamson. I use she, they pronouns. I am here in the Portland metro area, Washington County, here primarily as a parent. I have 2 young boys that are in preschool ECE services at the moment. And then my older son is 20, but he also went through the whole ranks of needing school support. And both of my young boys have faced some suspension, expulsion, things of that nature due to behavior right now. But I am also here with FACT Oregon. I would like to correct a small mistake on the introduction list of who we are. I am not FACT Oregon's executive director. We have an amazing executive director. Her name is Reeves, but I am one of our senior program specialists. I let Christy know I would be expecting that pay raise on my next check. But I'm here also because I do support families that have young folks and older folks that experience disability across the state. So first and foremost, always a parent, but here to bring in that perspective and the things that we're hearing from families across the state and how we've supported them as well. So thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, Molly. And if it works for you to type, please do that too into the chat as well. I want to make sure you're comfortable. Leslie.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leslie Barnes, and I use she and her pronouns. I'm the director of the Preschool and Early Learning Division here in Multnomah County. I live in Portland, Oregon. I've worn many hats in the system. I won't start listing them. I am a mom of an African-American child who's now an adult and an educator who experienced expulsion. I also chair the Black Child Development PDX group here in Portland, but I'm here officially representing Preschool for All. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Erin.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Erin Wienerstrom. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a parent, former educator. I've done some work with other states in exclusionary practices. And today my hat is as executive director of the Oregon Infant Mental Health Association. So I live in Eugene, very happy to be here and excited to see this work and support it.
Great, thank you. Zakiy.
Hello, everyone. I'm zakiy Ibrahim. I'm a parent as well as a provider, and I'm here today representing Black Child Development. Thank you. Oh, and I live in Tigard.
Great. Carrie and then Blanca.
Hi there, my name is Carrie. I'm a parent of 2 special needs toddlers, one 4-year-old who is actually in the EAD program for special needs, and I am very honored to be part of this council. I live in St. Helens.
Blanca.
Hi, my name is
Jennifer, sorry.
Okay, hello, my name is Lanka Morgan, and I go by she and her pronouns, and I'm a certified family child care provider who is trying to bring a perspective from this side. And I also have a child in the autism spectrum, and I've been doing this for 8 years, and I'm in Linn County.
Thank you, Blanca. I see Jennifer and Amber on camera.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Hook. I'm with Child Care Resource Referral in Umatilla, Morrow, and Union County. I am a quality improvement specialist and the training manager.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amber. I am a parent of 4, 2 children that are considered special needs. One is ADHD, and one has odd autism. I stutter. I'm sorry, but I am a certified home child care provider, and I have worked in the earlyhood childhood education field for the last 14 years.
Thank you, Amber, and welcome. And just that's everyone who I saw on camera. So now I'm trying to go through the list here of names. Ashley, did we hear from Lashley?
Hi, no, I'm Ashley. Ashley Newsom, pronoun she, her. I'm a parent of a son who has experienced expulsion at the age of 2. And I am a huge advocate for equity in education. I serve on the board of Campus Compact, and I am here to support in any way that I can.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm in Washington County. Sorry, I just saw that I forgot one.
Thank you. And I think Hadia and Melinda following that.
Okay. My name is Sadia Miller. Presently, I'm working at Child Care Resource of Multnomah County, and I'm an instructional coach for Preschool for All. Did I do it right? Or am I supposed to do something else?
Sounded good, Hadia.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Melinda Benson. I'm the program coordinator for Inclusive Partners. And as mentioned before, I'm here as support. I'm not here as part of the RAC committee, so I'm going to be off camera.
All right.
And I'm here in Portland. Sorry.
Great. And I think other than that, we would love to hear from Katrina and John, who are also with our ELD staff, and for the other support staff that we have. In the sake of time, if you could just kind of introduce yourself in the chat, we would appreciate it. We love you all, but the spotlights of the day are our RAC members. So thank you, Katrina and John.
Hi, everyone. I am the infant and early childhood mental health specialist with the ELD, and in one of the players in building out this new early childhood suspension and expulsion prevention program. So I'll just add to the welcome and the appreciation that's already been expressed for taking your time to be here. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in Portland.
Hi, everyone. This is great to see such a wonderful group. My name's John Reeves. I'm the Community Systems Team Manager at the Early Learning Division. My pronouns are he, him. Our team really focuses, which Katrina is on, our team really focuses on professional learning systems and training technical assistance. We work a lot with the Child Care Resource and Referrals, but this particular program, the Suspension and Expulsion Prevention Program, will be a part of our department, along with some other consultation work and systems that we're developing. And so I'm super excited to be here and to listen in, and I will stay in the background for the most part, but if there's any questions that I need to address or answer, I will be here ready to answer them. So super delighted to meet you all.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Katrina. I'm super excited to have you here as well. And unless I am interrupted at this moment, I believe we've gone through all of our RAC members. Please feel free to.
I just wanted to, pardon me.
Go ahead.
Wanted to interrupt you because I forgot to add, I got a little nervous when we started, so I missed a couple of the introduction keys. So I identify as he, him, L. And I am in Multnomah County in Portland.
Thank you, Dominic. And hopefully we can all kind of ease into this space, and as we get to know each other, feel more comfortable as well. So just want to know that we're trying to create this as the virtual welcoming space. And And again, just really want to appreciate everyone for being here, for your gift of time, and for sharing your knowledge, your skills, your wisdom with us. And I'd like to, at this moment, move on to really start zoning in onto the why we're here today and what is a RAC. So Remy is going to walk us through this as our amazing rules coordinator. Did I still get that right, Remy?
Yes, I am currently rule coordinator. We'll see what happens in the near future. If anyone wants to apply for the rule coordination job, it's open. That doesn't mean I'm leaving. I'm just not going to be doing rule coordinating anymore, which is sad because I wouldn't be here without being the rule coordinator. So thank you for having me. And I also just wanted to just tell everyone, first of all, you don't have to know what a rule is. I had no idea what a rule is until I got hired for this job. And then once I figured out what a rule was, I was like, yo, they hired me to do this job. This is wild. And that's why you're here, because this is a major way of making an impact in your field. So first of all, we're going to be using the acronym RAC a lot. Rulemaking Advisory Committee, RAC. That's what we all are here. A RAC is required by the Secretary of State if there's ever going to be a fiscal impact on rulemaking. So that's just the baseline. Obviously, we are doing the RAC because that is, there are many reasons why we're doing a RAC. And just really quickly, just wanted to back up and even just talk about what a rule is. Like I said, I did not know what a rule was before this job. So when you think about the legislative process, you think about like, oh, the bill, it goes through the Congress and then the governor signs it and then it's law and that's it, right? Nope, that is not it. What that law actually does is give government agencies the ability to write the rules that bolster that law. So I like to think of the law as like the headline, and then the rules are the bullet points. So this is the law, and then this is how you remain legal within that law. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be writing those bullet points in this RAC. So RACs, the reason that we pull together a RAC is because we're specifically looking for people across the state that we may not have heard from in the original development of the legislation. So you probably, we're going to be harping on this. Everyone here represents something different. Like we've got a broad geographic representation. We've got different partner groups represented here. We've got different like linguistic, racial, ethnic diversity. And we're really trying to get people who we generally don't hear from at this table so that we can understand how the rulemaking will impact your population. So just also really quickly, I want to talk about what a RAC is or what rules are and what rules aren't. Rules are obviously the bullet points of law. Rules are oddly specific. There's going to be a lot of conversation that we have in this group that won't make it to the rulemaking. And that's not because we don't hear you, it's just because that's not the right place for it. So when you have a policy that's been passed, we've got this law, we've got this new program, we have many different levers as administrators to implement the program, and rules are just one slice of the huge pie that we're working with. So you'll see that, as we go through and have our discussions, we're going to lay out the boundaries of where is the rule conversation and where are we talking about other areas of implementation. Like this can help with the program design. This will go inside the guidance manual. There are so many different ways that we have to distribute guidance on this program. And I just want to be really clear up front that rules are, unless you know what they are, like they're kind of hard to understand at first. And you'll get a feel as we go through the conversations and we identify where the conversation should be going. And another thing I just really wanted to emphasize as well is we've distributed this draft rule language in your packet. It's posted publicly. This is a public document. I really want to emphasize how draft that rule set is. All the language within that set, we have, it's just a draft. It's really a draft. We're trying to figure out from our other partners, our internal and external partners, once again, where does this piece go? Like, does this requirement need to go in rule, or should we be putting it somewhere else? So we're still trying to figure out where all of the pieces make the most sense. And I have a feeling that the rule language is going to morph as we figure all of this out, because this is a really this isn't the first suspension and expulsion program in the country, but it is going to be the first equity-centered suspension and expulsion program, which Carrie will definitely talk about more. So we're all in a learning space. Everything is modifiable, and we're looking to hear all of your perspectives, and we're taking all of the notes, and we're going to make sure that we consider all of the input as we build this entire thing. So I just kind of blurted out a lot of technical government administrator kind of stuff. Does anyone have any questions on rules, rule language, RACs, boring government administrative law stuff? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone unmute. Okay, excellent. Okay, cool. Well, that means I explained it well, so that's great. That's exactly what I want to hear. Okay, cool. And I think the next slide is, I think I'm passing it off to my distinguished colleagues.
That would be me in this case. So these next slides and this information that I want to go over is just to kind of set the groundwork for the context for why we're here, why the suspension and expulsion prevention program was created. Carrie will go over in a little while some of the more details, kind of what the data shows us, but this is just a little bit more of a broader context and kind of ways of thinking. So here, just to start off with some things that we know. We know that caring for young children is hard work. It is typically underpaid. It's definitely undersupported. I think many of us have probably worked in direct care with caring for young children, or have children, or have been closely enough associated that we know just how hard that work is. We also know that young children hit, kick, they bite, they scream, they wiggle, they won't sit still, and they won't line up. And there's other behaviors that can be challenging for adults to deal with. I know, like going to the grocery store, occasionally see that toddler that melts down and has the tantrum there. Like that's what toddlers do sometimes, but that presents challenges. We also know that young children get suspended and expelled because of these behaviors, even because of behaviors that are developmentally appropriate, behaviors that we would expect from young children. Because developmentally appropriate behaviors can also be challenging to deal with. We also know that the care that young children receive impacts their early development, their language development, cognitive development, social and emotional development, and that early development impacts the rest of life. It impacts school that comes later on, academic achievement, social skills, ability to get along, and then that leads into adult life and the ability to get along with others, the ability to hold a job or have choices around what career a person wants. So early education is so important. And that leads us to this, that everyone needs more support. When children are exhibiting challenging behaviors or just typical behaviors that are challenging, we need to provide support to those kids. We don't want to just walk away from them in that time. Families need support. and providers need support. And I think sometimes suspension and expulsion starts to feel like an either or. It's about supporting the children or about supporting the providers. But the truth is we need to do both. And it is by supporting providers, supporting families, that we can support children and help children to be successful. So this program, the Suspension and Expulsion Prevention Program, is intended to provide those supports. We're going to have a lot of work to do to build the supports in the system, but that's the purpose behind it. So specifically, just to spell it out even more, the purpose of the program is to reduce the use of suspension and expulsion in early care and education programs, and to reduce disparities in the use of suspension and expulsion. So the data is really clear. Carrie will go over that later. It's children who are Black and Brown are suspended at rates far higher than their white peers. Children with disabilities are expelled, suspended and expelled at rates far higher than children without disabilities. So those two first points are the ones that we are really going to be focusing on in this this RAC. But there's another element to the program, which is in July 2026, the use of suspension and expulsion will be eliminated. We will, sneak preview, we will have another RAC in probably about 3 years to really dig into some of the rules around what it means to eliminate suspension and expulsion. Right now, our huge focus is what are those supports that we're going to need, and how do we need to change our system to reduce and prevent the use of suspension and expulsion. All right, next slide. Some of you are probably familiar with this, this metaphor, but I think it deserves spending a little bit of time here. So imagine that you have a lake outside of your house, wherever you live. And when you walk out one day, you see a dead fish floating on the top of the water. And you think, what's wrong with that fish? So now let's imagine a scenario where you walk outside your house one day and you see hundreds of fish floating on top of the water. The question changes to, what's going on? What's affecting all of these fish? And then you call your friends that live in the next town over. They also happen to have lakes outside of their houses. And everybody has fish, hundreds of fish floating on the top of their lakes. So then the question becomes even deeper, like what's happening in the water? What's impacting the fish in all of these lakes, all of these places? And of course, if there's an impact in groundwater, it's not going to just affect the fish, it's going to affect all of us. So then let's bring that back to suspension and expulsion. We know, well, our early care and education system isn't just one lake. And in fact, sometimes it's just a small pond. We have a lot of ponds and we have some lakes, but they're all connected with the same groundwater, the same system. If you look at any one given pond or one given lake, it might look like there's a child who needs help and support. And it might feel like we should ask the question, what's wrong with this child? Or what's wrong with this family? But when we take that step back and we realize that our system and our structure is all of these lakes are connected, then we have to, and we see the many, many children who are being suspended and expelled, then we have to take that other look and say, what's wrong with the groundwater? Or what's wrong with the system? What is it that is underlying these this trend that we're seeing? And so that this idea is something that's we'll carry it through in our conversations. So it is not to deny that any individual experience is challenging. Individual experiences are challenging, but it's about creating a system that supports everybody and fixes the groundwater, fixes the systemic problem. All right, next slide. So just a little more detail on, so there's two bills. There's House Bill 2166, which establishes this program. And then the one that we'll talk more about in a few years is Senate Bill 236, which is the one that eliminates suspension and expulsion. But a little bit more detail about 2166, that it has all of these elements to it. Starting from the left, we want to support the early childhood education workforce. We want to provide additional training, coaching, and consultation to educators to support children's social emotional development, to support children's positive racial identity development, and to promote anti-bias, culturally responsive, and inclusive practices. We want to also support our technical assistance workforce. And what we mean by technical assistance are the people who work for our local CCR&Rs, or the specialists that work in Head Starts. There are a lot of different possible roles that fall under this, but people who are already in our system as well, in our system providing supports, but we want to provide additional training, coaching, and consultation to our technical assistance workforce to ensure that they can support early childhood education programs with implementing foundational anti-bias, culturally responsive, and inclusive practices. So then another piece is infant and early childhood mental health consultation. This is probably in some ways the biggest new thing, is we're building a new program, statewide access to infant and early childhood mental health consultation. There are parts of the state that currently already have access to consultation, but there are plenty of areas around the state that don't. And we want to build a system where consultation is accessible, that it is culturally responsive, it's trauma informed, and specifically, we want to increase the cultural and racial diversity of our consultation workforce. And lots of pieces there. Amber, did you have a question?
Yes, my question, and I might be jumping the gun, and if I am, I do apologize. My question, and I'm only asking this because all of these resources that are coming out and the studies that are being shown are geared toward the provider or the child care taker. My concerns are what can a provider, or is there going to be anything that providers can do when parents aren't on the same page as the provider is, and acknowledging that, yeah, my child may need some extra services. That's my only concern, because I've had parents in the past who I've said, hey, so, I'm noticing this. I've had a journal of when a child has a meltdown or a hard time, and they're in denial that there's something wrong, or it's, oh, not my child. And I'm not saying that that's with every parent, but is there going to be something implemented for providers if a parent is not on the same page? Because at that point, our hands are tied as a provider.
So those are some of the questions that we're going to need to wrestle with around, like, how do we figure out how to provide supports and to whom in those situations. So I can't say that I have the answer for you. I wish I did. But I think your question actually speaks to this next piece on this slide, which is this coordinated system of support. So it actually isn't mentioned in this, but on the slide itself, but I think it falls into this. So one of the goals is to create this warm line where a provider can, or a family can, a warm line that a provider or family can access and request support and say, we have a child that we're concerned that we may need to suspend or we may need to expel. We're concerned and we want some support before we get there. So we're going to try to make that upfront and easy to access. And then on kind of the backside of that, after that request comes in, there'll be a coordination process of who is the best person, who's the best role to respond. Is it a technical assistance provider? Is it, for example, a coach with CCR&R? Is it a mental health consultant? Is it someone else? But the other piece that doesn't show up on this slide is that we will be working with more broadly with our community mental health programs and funders to kind of build that system of support, or build not build the support, but build the connections, because that we need that support all the way along the way. The biggest focus for this program will be on providing supports to providers. And Amber, my hope is that we can design supports so that if there are times when you are experiencing, and you aren't alone, it's common to have, communication challenges. And we want to be able to provide supports to you and to providers, regardless of whether parents are kind of on board, in a sense, with that or not. Zakiy.
Hi, I just had a question on the support, the ECE Workforce. Will that training be like a broad, like we have to take a safety set of trainings, correct? Have to have CPR first aid. Will there be a mandatory special needs training or diversity training that the state will have that mandates all providers? Or is this more of a response to a provider reaching out that they have some, they're having some difficulty with the children? Or, because I would hope that we can have a more preventative measure of making sure that all providers understand typical child development. So making that maybe as a required training that all providers have, because not everybody know that biting is, normal for 2-year-olds. And so what kind of preventative measures I'm hoping that this will address?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I think the answer to your question is we're hoping to do both the preventive and the response. But really, I mean, the focus here is really, we want to prevent the problems, prevent the suspensions and expulsions. So all of that work in terms of like the details of what that training will be and when and how it's delivered, all of that still needs to be developed. And there will be, this is the first of many opportunities for people to weigh in and say, here are the things that I think are essential to have as part of that, that preventive training, that kind of foundational practices that providers must have. So we'll be gathering those ideas throughout these conversations, and there also will be we're actively planning some additional opportunities for people to come together and talk about just exactly those types of ideas and gather those together. I think there's one more slide, and then we'll see if there's any other questions. So the House Bill 2166 specifically requires us to define certain terms. So things like suspension, expulsion, soft expulsion, implicit bias, anti-bias, anti-racist practice, some of these things. So these are, when you look at the rule set that Remy sent out, you'll find definitions for all of these things. And that is really what this committee work is all about, is digging in and defining those things. It's about that with the, I have to acknowledge the what Remy said earlier about it's all draft, and there are plenty of people who will be weighing in before we're done. We'll establish a grant making program for regional programs to start infant and early childhood mental health consultation. And then we'll define requirements for early childhood programs that receive public funds, to what are the requirements around requesting services to prevent suspension and expulsion. So all of those elements are things that we'll be talking about in the coming weeks in this group. So any questions? Okay. Oh, yes, Martina.
Has there been thought about I'm with consultation and education, and that goes a long way, but also from being a former educator in a classroom for so many years, I think ratio and having an extra person there goes a long way. So has there been some thought about having a pool of people in every county to step in and help as a person? Like, I've had children in my classroom that just needed their own person. And that is really, and I was working at a place that had great ratio, and we always had extra people, but I know in general that is not the case. So has there been thought about an actual person for help, in addition to, of course, consultation and education and all of that?
That is a great question. And I'm going to write down that idea. I should say I am fairly new. I've been at the ELD about 6 weeks. So I have not been a part of a conversation where that has come up, but that doesn't mean that there haven't been those conversations or that there won't be. So we'll definitely keep track of that idea. John, I noticed you came on camera. Did you have anything to add to that?
Just very briefly, I just wanted to say that it's a great suggestion, Martina, and we are in the process of developing a statewide substitute pool, which I think, as we're thinking about how strategies should combine and work together, I think it's a perfect example of thinking about how we should connect those two things up when we're really thinking about supporting children and early educators in environments. So thank you.
Amber.
Sorry, and excuse me if I'm moving ahead, but I was reading the draft and the definitions of what suspension, a soft suspension, and it even talked about excluding a child from an activity and sending them to the director's office. I'm curious as if we're going to work on these definitions or if we're going to eliminate these. And I'm only asking that because my daughter is ADHD and she goes to school, and when she's struggling and she's having a hard time, she's excluded from the classroom, and she's put into this room where she can jump on a trampoline, do art, meditate. And so my question is, if we're going to take these rules out, they also should be implemented in elementary schools because they have more resources and more services. I do think that sometimes removing a child from a situation, especially if they're being unsafe to themselves and to other kids, that's important. And so I think that when we make these rules, it's really important to hear the providers as well as the parents, because sometimes children are being traumatized from the child that is having a hard time, and providers, I stutter, I don't always do it, but when I'm trying to think of what I need to say and it to come out really fast, I don't represent myself well, but I've been in this field for 14 years, and my heart is special needs kids. But sometimes if the day is just too much for them, and I've tried everything, I do send them home, and it's because all of my learning training that I've done, I've learned and worked with, all of my tricks are not working, and sometimes they just need a mommy day. They just need to reset themselves. And so I'm all for not suspending a child. I just want to make sure that it benefits everyone as a whole and not traumatize the other children in the program. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
So,
yes. And yes, situations are complex. Individual children's needs are complex. And so I would just invite you to remember the piece about we want to provide support to everyone. That's a big job for us to figure out, but that's what we want to do. And so hold that in mind as our goal and what would it take to get there. And we will have lots of time to dig into those specific definitions. We won't have that time specifically today, but Carrie will tell us more about that.
And Amber, I think you're raising a great issue about when you saw on Remy's slide of reasons to pull the RAC together is the unanticipated consequence of the language. So we do want to talk about the definitions. We do want to hear examples of that, because we even wrestled with suspension where a kid gets sent to a room or a director's office and does nothing. Versus what you just described, which is, goes to a place with a trampoline, there's a staff person who's supporting them with regulation and support, that it's actually part of their development and a way to engage in the group setting and take breaks when they need to. And so we knew that the language doesn't capture that nuance. So getting everyone's feedback on things to think about, unintended consequences of the current language. So when we get to those definitions, this is the kind of discussion we would like to have as we think about what really needs to be in rules versus is this the kind of thing that we might ultimately go, this should be in guidance or in contracts or in professional development to tease apart these nuances of where is it supportive and where is it not.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you, Carrie, and everyone for the questions that we've received so far. I do want to acknowledge that we are almost at the halfway point, and this would be the perfect time for us to kind of take a quick little screen break, stretch break, potty break, but we'll see you back at 2 o'clock. And once we come back, we'll move on to kind of going in more thoroughly of what some of facilitation principles will be, and also defining group agreements for us to move forward with these conversations in the coming weeks. So go ahead and take a little screen break, and we'll see you back at 2 o'clock. All right. Slowly welcoming everyone back. And we're going to kind of move forward and make sure that we can get through the group agreement section, and then afterwards also have more discussion regarding suspensional expulsion with data from Carrie. So let's go ahead and get going, and let's see. So is Remy back to share our slides?
Yes.
Great. Well, we're not quite there, Remy. We're there we go. Yes. So as we move through these conversations, just really, and now that we've clarified more of the role of the RAC and why we're here, our core purpose, Carrie and I as facilitators for these conversations want to share some of our key facilitation principles and then move forward onto the group agreements. So in the next slide, we can see some of these, the four main facilitation principles that we want to share with you all and answer any questions if there are. These are values that we look forward to moving through the conversations and discussion with. So first off, want to really move forward with hope and the belief that a better future is possible for us and the children across Oregon. We want to honor the collective wisdom that is in this virtual space. We got a chance to hear from everyone and to briefly meet everyone who is here today. Just really want to make sure that we honor all of your wisdom and that your individual wisdom and that of the circles and community that you are also connected to, because we know that we hold threads to others outside of this space as well. This effort overall really centers equity. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge and recognize and move forward with conversations that center that equity is the heart of this effort and this legislation. And then lastly, we anticipate very fruitful conversations and perhaps also some uncomfortable conversations. However, we want to highlight that it's important to keep the space safe for us all and that we can be brave and listen to new ideas, that some of us might hear information that might be new for us and that might be where the discomfort lays. But that we are here to learn and to share more than anything in terms of the RAC and really trying to center the purpose of this. As facilitators, we will intentionally keep conversations related to our overall goal and make sure that we are centering the conversation more so around the system that we are discussing, right? So as we heard from Katrina, really talking about providing those supports. And that is a system approach that we are taking, especially as we are approaching this from a government perspective. But we'll hear a little bit more of what those system implications are and the impacts that systems have on suspension and expulsion. And let's see. On to the next slide, we'll see a little bit more about our facilitation practices and how we are expecting to move forward with these conversations. We'll be using different methods, including large discussion, small discussion. Again, welcome to input things in the chat. We will also be using some electronic Post-it notes, and Carrie's going to walk us through this, but it's a very straightforward electronic Post-it approach that we can share ideas, and those are all anonymous, so that would be really helpful for us all to use. Again, we're going to be documenting all recommendations, and some of those might make it directly into the RAC language, but other language and other suggestions are going to be really helpful as well as we move forward with the program implementation. So just really want to make sure that, that we are documenting ideas, suggestions, questions. And lastly, please feel free to connect with myself and Carrie in between meetings for any questions, any feedback, any requests that you might have regarding the meetings, the facilitation, and how we can best support you in between meetings as well as during meetings. So just want to lay these out. Are there any questions before we kind of transition onto group agreements? So this is just our facilitation approach and our principles. All right. I see none. And so let's go ahead and jump on to group agreements. And we have shared these slides already, I believe. Is that correct, Ravi? Yeah, so feel free to go back to these and look over them if there are more questions after this meeting. Again, feel free to reach out with those. For group agreements, we want to have an opportunity to have your space, and we are here as facilitators, and again you have agency staff who is here to support, but this is your space, so we want to make sure that we're facilitating a conversation and setting up the space as best suits all of you. So we'll go ahead and use these agreements as a foundation of how we want to interact with each other. We've set some examples here. Feel free to include these or to scratch, reword your own. But Carrie's, we're going to be using the idea boards for this and breaking into small groups. So Carrie, if you want to kind of just guide us into how are we going to break into small groups, and then giving us some quick tips on how to use the idea boards, and we'll be dropping that link into the chat, I imagine, to make sure that everyone can quickly access it.
Great. So if we could go to the next slide, Remy. So, you know, today is as much about practice as it is about hearing from you about the group agreements. That's really important to Karina and I, that we honor how you would like to interact in the 3 meetings where we'll really be diving into the content of the rules. So we wanted to break you up into small groups, and Remy will share your groups with you. You have time to make quick introductions to each other to build off of how you met each other already. And the ideas board is really a post-it note strategy, and it's completely anonymous. So you as a small group can put post-it notes up on it with your ideas and recommendations to us. And if some of you are more comfortable with technology than others, you can always nominate one person to capture the small groups. But as an individual, I wanted to let you know, you can always use the link that Remy's going to put in the chat, bring it up, and you can add your own post-it notes, and we don't know who has shared what post-it notes. So throughout these 4 meetings, if you want to give us recommendations or input and just add it as a post-it note, you're more than invited to use that board anytime during our conversations, as well as around specific activities. And that we will do a quick debrief, so you could pick 1 or 2 people to share a few of your most favorite group agreements of how you would like us to work. So Remy, if you bring up the next slide, it shows kind of what an ideas board looks like. So what you see on the right-hand side is kind of how you see like that I could have a main heading, and then I might have 2 questions like what went well or what didn't go well. Today, you'll see only 1 color of post-it note and 1 question, which is what are the group agreements you'd like to have. Where you see the black arrow on the picture that's pointing to a green plus, that's how you add a post-it note to the screen. You click on the green plus, and then a empty post-it note pops up, and then you type in it, and then you hit return, and then the post-it note goes up on the board and it stays there. So it's really just gives us a way to, we wish we were in the same space with all of you, and I was literally handing you post-it notes as a way to share ideas with you. So we hope it's relatively easy. Remy and I can help any small group get started when you break into your conversations. Is there any questions about what you're answering or how this will work? Remy will step us through how you'll select yourself into your small group, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to open up some breakout rooms. I'm actually, Carrie, I'm so sorry. I have the wrong ideas board link and I'm desperately looking through our emails to find the right one.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about that. But yes, I have breakout rooms set up. We are going to, oh, thank you, Molly. How did you have that? I really appreciate it. We've got some small groups that we're going to set up. I've got the breakout rooms going and I'm just going to stop sharing. And we're just going to move into those breakout rooms. I'm going to invite everyone and here we go. I just want a reminder that anyone who is still in the main room is going to be live streamed. And to anyone on the live stream, so sorry. We are in small groups. We're going to debrief when we get back, so stay tuned.
Amy, can you make sure that Amy goes into the room?
Got it. Thank you, Meredith. So it actually looks like Hadia is, I'm not sure if she's still here. I'm not seeing her right now. But Amy, I'll put you in room 2 because that's where you were, or room 3 because that's where we were supposed to put Hadia. So I don't know where she went.
Sure. Do you want me to text? She often has like connectivity issues. Do you want me to see if she's gotten disconnected or?
Oh no. Sorry about that.
No problem. I was asking if you would like me to get in
No,
touch
I would
with
love
her.
that. Thank you so much.
For me, it looks like you're logged in twice.
I know that's because I've got to go take notes in the group room. So I'm gonna go. Bye.
our group. Carrie, are we coming back and sharing?
Yeah, we could put the screen up and invite anyone who wanted to comment on them instead of going group by group.
Let's do that.
Okay. Welcome back. Do we have everyone, Remy?
We should. I don't think there's anyone stuck in purgatory anymore. So.
So Karina, I thought because of time, and these are such a great set of group agreements that we would share the screen so you could again see what everyone contributed. We will be happy to combine the same ideas and give you an official list that we'll use for the next 3 meetings. So we'll clean this up. But Karina, I thought, is there anyone who would like to say if there's one that particularly resonates the most with you, or something that you just wanted to highlight that was most important to your small group discussion?
I'll go. This is Leslie. I think one, there were 3, but assume positive intent, like give people grace, create opportunities and space for multiple truths, because we all have our truth. And the one that I contributed that I think is really important is reflect on our own bias, because we do all have them.
Thank you, Leslie. Any other reactions as you see this list?
The one that kind of stuck out to me, and we had a discussion about it in our group as well, was listen to understand. Especially because we do have a lot of different perspectives, and listening to understand is, kind of getting it, everybody sharing knowledge to make the best decisions.
Great, thank you, Dominic. Well, I really appreciate this list, and Karina and I will summarize it and send it back out as materials for our next meeting. And so I hope you guys will give me a little grace as I try to give you the national data of how we understand expulsion and suspension, and ready to understand what it's like in the Oregon context. So Remy, if you'll put the slide deck back up. And I'll pause. I'll take questions anytime. Karina, if you could help me keep track if people are raising their hands or putting things in the comments, that would be great. And if we could go to the next slide, Remy. I'll talk to you about what we know about who's being expelled and what is it from kind of a national definition perspective as you think about what's important for the Oregon definition. We'll pause and see if there's any questions, and then I'll go into kind of Katrina's metaphor around our ponds or lake water. How are we understanding about the multiple reasons why expulsion and suspension exist, and why we really need multiple strategies at the state level to support children, families, and providers. And many of you have started to raise those kinds of issues already in our conversation. So, I think expulsion and suspension is relatively a new term for early care and education providers to kind of use in their practice. In the early days, when I talked to others in other states, they were like, we don't really call it expulsion. We talk about children needing to be picked up early, or why don't we take a break and calm everything down and not have your child come in tomorrow, or why don't we reduce the amount of time that a child participates in our program over the next few weeks, or maybe our program just isn't right, or we can't meet your child's needs. When looking at the formal definitions, there were 2 sources that I wanted to give you to have you think about as you look at what was drafted in the rule set. Remy, if you go to the next slide. One is on the right-hand side, you see that the source at the bottom is Stepping Stones to Caring for Our Children. And a partner of mine in North Carolina said, oh, it's the child care Bible. So I think this is the guidance to child care programs around best practice on a whole wide range of what it's like to implement and support children and families in a child care setting. And so you can see there are official definitions around exclusionary practices. So terminating enrollment because of a challenging behavior or health condition, reducing the amount of time in attendance at a setting. And then what's interesting about their definition is that they talk about limiting participation in things like outdoor time or using food as a reward or punishment. The definition on the left-hand side comes from a guide that's designed for early care and education providers who want to go into their own policy and practice that they have around expulsion and suspension. So that link, for those of you who are providers, if you want to see the tool online that they are offering to providers. So they offered definitions around the similar. So you can see they use slightly different language. And that they're the ones who raised the issue around soft expulsion, where it's technically the parent who pulls the child out of the program, but maybe there were a set of activities or strategies a provider did where the parent said, you know, I can't handle this. And they're the ones that actually pulled the child out of the program. And you'll see a more complete definitions in the Oregon rule set for us to debate and discuss at our next meeting. All right, next slide, Remy. So why focus on expulsion and suspension? Well, we know that actually expulsion and suspension is not actually an intervention, that families and children don't get necessarily a benefit from the experience of this. We know that if you are expelled or suspended early in your education experience, what it generally predicts is that you will be expelled or suspended later in your experience. So obviously it's not the kind of intervention where we say, oh, it suddenly helped us with a child's challenging behaviors. And this last bullet point is really based on early elementary school data, not on preschool or early childhood data, but we've been thinking about the implications that if you experience expulsion and suspension in early childhood, what does that set you up for when you enter into the school system? That we know that children who are expelled or suspended in the young grades of early elementary school, that they're 10 times more likely to drop out of high school, fail a grade, or be incarcerated. So this is kind of like, how do we think about supports, transitions, the best settings for children? How do we help all settings support the children that they're serving? Because this kind of practice doesn't really have a result in a positive outcome, even for some children. So what do we know? So there was this kind of research that came out in 2006 that really at the time surprised everyone. And what I would want you to pay attention to is that really that what expulsion was happening in pre-K was much higher rate than what was happening in K-12. So you see in K-12 that they're showing you that approximately 2 kids out of every 1,000 were expelled, and we're in school-funded preschool programs, 6 kids out of every 1,000 were expelled. And that's what really put this topic on the kind of everyone's radar across the country. And when you start to see states think about what are our supports, what are our policies, what should we be doing around this issue? The child care bar is not from national studies, it's from multiple states combined together. So I think there's about 5 states in that study. And it doesn't really surprise us because I think even someone said it earlier in this conversation, oh, the schools have so much more resources. So there's things around the right to an education in the K-12 system that prevents and reduces the use of expulsion and suspension, and they have more resources on how to address situations. And so it doesn't really surprise us from kind of that pond, what's in the water, what's going on with the supports and resources for childcare to see numbers that would be higher. So who is getting expelled? So we know that children of all ages, birth to 5, are getting expelled. We know that children of all races are getting expelled. We know both genders are getting expelled, but there are very distinct disparities that have been replicated numerous times by numerous studies across the country. So we know that boys are more likely to be expelled than girls. We know that 4-year-olds are more likely to be expelled than 3-year-olds. that Black children are expelled twice the rate of white children and 5 times the rate of Asian American children. We know that, and when we talk about disparities, we're also talking about representation. So you can see in some of this data, they give you the enrollment data compared to the suspension data. So we know that Black children make up 18% of the enrollment of preschool across the country, but they make up 48% of the preschoolers who are suspended. And so you can see these data points of like, really, we're doing expulsion by gender, by age, and by race. And what this comment means in the box about that these risks are multiplicative really means that they add up. So if you are 4 years old and you're a boy and you're Black, those add up and you're even more likely to be expelled than if you're a 3-year-old girl who is white. So you see that I don't have anything on this thing that says if you do this kind of challenging behavior or you have that kind of challenging behavior, the increase of likelihood of expulsion goes up. What we really have is it's really showing in these kind of characteristics of people. So that is what makes us start to say, what's going on in that lake? What's going on in the pond that is leading up to kind of these disparities? Remy? I also want to mention that infants and toddlers are not exempt from experiencing being asked to leave programs. Now, obviously, their behaviors on the infancy side are different than on the toddler side. But I wanted to mention that really this research comes from multiple cities doing research on their expulsion and suspension as what is happening, and this is not national data. So you can see in Chicago that they found out, oh, children under age 3 are being asked to leave a program, and that was kind of significant. It was almost half of their program serving that population. And that Philadelphia found in 2017, about 26% of their programs had asked the child to leave in the past year, and that toddlers were just as likely as preschoolers to leave the childcare setting. And then the last thing I'll say about disparities is on the next slide, and then I'll breathe for a second, and I see there's at least one question. Then we also know that children with delays or disabilities are being expelled. And so there was a children's health survey. This is parent report. So you can see a lot of caveats in the data points. So this was about children 3 to 5, where the parents identified that their child had a delay or disability, that they comprised 12% of the early care and ed programs of the parents who responded to the survey, but they represented and reported the experience of suspension expulsion. Of all the parents who reported experiencing expulsion and suspension, 75% of them were with children who were 3 to 5 with disabilities. It's actually probably a clearer way to put it. And so they gave this rate of chance or odds of being expelled was 14 times higher for children who were reported in that survey than their typically developing peers. The other way that we kind of know about this occurrence kind of from a research data perspective is the National Center for Children in Poverty has helped numerous states do anonymous early care and education provider report surveys. So it's the provider who's filling out the survey. And they have found consistently across these 5 states, and I can list them, they're Maine, Virginia, Michigan, New Mexico, and of course, I'm blanking on the 5th state, but they found a higher percentage of children who were asked to leave a program due to a challenging behavior, and that those disparities were similar whether the program was center-based or home-based. Amber?
Yeah, I'm just curious of what the studies were on, such as you said that children were removed for behavior issues, and some were due to being children with disabilities.
Yeah.
My questions are, what were the settings? Sorry, my dog is barking. I know that my daughter, she's 3. I'm a provider, but I actually send her to a smaller program
Right.
because when there's 4 kids here, she does great. I'm gonna move, so sorry.
Good.
When there's 4 children here, she does great. She's playful. She interacts. The moment that there's 8 kids, it overwhelms her, and she starts to stim, and she tries to touch my bare skin. And then if it's too overwhelming for her, she literally tries to hide. or she prefers to go into the infant room where there's 3 kids or 4 kids, a smaller ratio. And as a parent, I did what was right for her, and I removed her from my program and I put her into a smaller program because it was more successful for her. Do I like that I teach childcare and I'm paying for another provider? No, but this childcare setting was not the right fit for her because it overstimulated her, and she's too young to use headphones, and she didn't want to wear a weighted vest to kind of help make her feel safe. So those are just my questions. Sometimes it's not the provider, sometimes it's the environment, which will make a child act a certain way, which can be disruptive to a classroom, which can possibly expel a child. Not saying that that's every situation. I just think that we should listen and hear of what is all taking place, because sometimes the center of the setting's not right because it's overwhelming. It's too stimulating. I'm just multiple sides of it. That's all. So I'm just curious.
Absolutely. And I think maybe in the conversation of the definitions, we should really pull some of these things apart, because what I hear you saying is you did a transition for your child from a setting that didn't meet their needs to a setting that did meet their needs, but that you got to be part of it and you got to think about the relationships your child was having and have a way to transition it. I think often expulsion and suspension, when it's a negative event, is not a planful transition of discovering, right? It's usually abrupt. It pulls a parent out of work, and it's a negative break of any relationships that child might have with relationships with other children and their caregivers. So I think actually exploring some of those things at our next meeting about what do we really mean about expulsion and suspension versus when are we using strategies that actually help the children that we're trying to serve. And I think when I was listening to Katrina talk, also, what are the supports the state could be offering so that more children like what you were describing could be supported in a more diverse set of settings? So maybe they'll always need there's certain kids who will always need a smaller group size, but how do we do that? And what might that be? And what kind of resources does that take,
And last thing, because I know this is it's timed, but as a provider, before I make that tough choice to expel a child, I try to talk to the parents. I have anecdotal notes. I try to even have a parent come in and shadow and see what I'm doing and give me pointers, because what works at home may not work here, and what works here may not work at home. And where I, as a provider, say I've tried all that I can, is the parents not listening to me, and they're not trying to get the services that I'm offering, like warm line. And so I'm going to finish, but I'm done, but I'm just, yeah.
And I know Katrina is taking notes right now, right? As we think about implementation of what's the partnership with you, and is the mental health consultant one of those, or is there other trusted supports that providers would like to have in those conversations with parents, whether it's an easier conversation and you're getting on the same page about how you're modifying your program for that child, or is a transition needed, versus when you're alone, so I think we're trying to think about what's the support so that kind of negotiation and conversations with parents can also be supported. Because I think as we kind of try to look, if Remy, if you'll go to the next slide, think about, okay, so we have all this information about who's more likely to be expelled. We're very concerned about these disparities. We don't think that 4-year-olds who are boys or Black are significantly different than their white peers, but they're being expelled at higher rates. Why is that? How do we think about that? So if we go to the next slide, Remy. The research is starting to point at this kind of groundwater metaphor that Katrina gave us of like, what else is in the water? What's contributing to the expulsion and suspension? And I think you're really highlighting nuance of expulsion and suspension versus transition versus what kinds of settings meet the needs for different kinds of kids, and how do we best support providers and parents in figuring that out. So Remy, if we go to the next slide, Research is pointing to a mix of reasons of why we're seeing expulsion and suspension. And Remy, as I talk about them, if you could click on the button, they'll start to fill in the definitions. So one is structural quality. And I think the initial research that came out that even told us this was an issue in early childhood speaks a lot to this. And I think someone who talked about ratios and is there a way to get extra staffing, which I think would both help with group size as well as maybe extra support for specific children. So things like higher ratios, teacher stress and feeling of hopelessness. Gilliam the researcher called it private childcare, but it tends to be the least regulated, too little or too much classroom structure, and then no consistent availability of mental health consultants. These are the kinds of features that increase the likelihood of expulsion. Does it explain a particular child or provider in front of you of why expulsion is happening? No, but like if we looked across the entire country, what increases the likelihood of expulsion? One reason is structural quality. So they could see across preschool classrooms and across states that have different policies on things like ratios, where was there increased expulsion or less expulsion? A second contributor to this is kind of organizational capacity. So this is probably how we design and fund our early care and education programs. So if there's if the way you have staff and can pay for staff means there's no time to reflect, that often providers are weighing the needs of different parents and children. So there's often the dealing with parents whose child's been bit, even if you know the development around a child who's biting, the issue of staff turnover and afraid of losing staff. And that are the trainings and the programs that exist in your state really meeting the needs of for the children. A third contributing is lack of knowledge about child development. So there was research done that it was about 20% of childcare providers said that they had access to training on social emotional development and how to facilitate it and how to understand how it develops in the context of family, community, and cultural expectations, and that children can come with different ways of expressing anger, happiness, sadness that not everyone will necessarily know about. And so the interaction of some of these might be like if we set up programs where they don't have time to go get training and then the training's not available, like these things kind of combine to create the kind of expulsion rates that we've been seeing across states. Another one is really racial disparities in discipline. So we know that expulsion and suspension is kind of a lagging indicator, right? It's the end of an interaction. It's not all the series of things that have happened before. And that it's been shown in research that how children of color are monitored in a classroom, that there's parents will have similar perceptions of their children's development, but there'll be differences in teachers. And that we know across the country, the more underprepared teachers are, the more likely they are to use punitive disciplinary techniques. So I think this all interacts with each other, right? If we structure our programs where they don't get time off to be able to do professional development, they're not connecting around how to support social emotional development. And then they're frustrated and dealing with difficult situations so in the studies that showed underprepared teachers that those kids were more likely to be referred for special education or were expelled and suspended. And then another kind of contributing effort is around the trauma behavior connection. So we do have children that are experiencing trauma. I think there's an increase, lots of things are coming out of the pandemic of an increased set of challenging behaviors around the experience of loss of families or other kinds of traumas. And that even before the pandemic, the organization 0 to 3 said that from a public health perspective, we should expect about 10 to 14% of our children under the age of 5 to experience some kind of emotional relationship issue where they would need extra supports. And so when we think about the quality of our settings, that's a lot for providers to be dealing with by themselves. And so this is why we're kind of thinking about the supports. And then the last one is systemic issues. And this is very brand new research from just a couple places in the country, but one found that if a family had moderate to severe food insecurity, this was only found for boys, but if they had boys under the age of 5, they were 11 times more likely to be expelled or suspended. And then in the recent research around housing, let me see. Oh, it just said that if a family had insecure housing, that the children were more likely to be expelled or suspended. So to me, the main takeaway from this is that lots of different reasons for why children are being expelled and suspended has to do with what's in our lake and how that is combining to really aggravate the situation, and that providers are dealing with a lot to run their programs, to keep them staffed, and that we really want to create a support system that helps tease apart in any given situation. Not all of these things are happening at the same time. But if you don't know that a family is homeless or hungry, or that they've experienced some kind of trauma, or that there's some things that didn't happen in your training or professional development, that those kinds of things can be teased out in support. And so it's just, I will pause here because I see there's questions, but I think the takeaway is that this is complex, and it's why I think Oregon's thinking about multiple strategies to try to help support providers and teasing apart in your situation, what's going on, and how can we best support the child, the family, and you, in teasing apart where the support is needed most. All right, Karina, if you could help me with questions.
Yeah, there's one question, and Carrie, I'm not sure if you'd like to say a little bit more, but it says, are they also looking at physical safety aspects? And I don't know, Carrie, if it was you who had raised their hand. Somebody had a raised hand and then I lost it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what is interesting, right, is all this research isn't connecting that if certain physical behaviors of a child that put themselves or others at risk increase the likelihood of expulsion. I think that our expectation is that's the externalizing behaviors that children have puts them at higher risk for expulsion. It is interesting that out of all these surveys and all the different ways providers have probably been asked about the kinds of behaviors children have had that result in them asking to leave a program, it doesn't raise to the top as these other things do. So I think this really lends itself that it's the system part and the support part that we need to tackle first, and then within that understand if the physical safe, how do we keep people physically safe? And I think what we'll want to be exploring with you in those definitions and the requirements of providers to ask for help, are we capturing when physical safety is an issue, how that's handled in the short term, as well as supporting the child to be able to be in early care and its settings in the longer term. But it is interesting that the research never flags physical safety as a correlation for increasing the likelihood of expulsion.
Yeah, sorry. Can I? Go ahead. Okay. One of the challenges is the safety for everybody. So when that becomes an issue or a concern to that degree, that's basically when most of the family providers feel like there's no other option but to be sincere and let the parent know the limitations that they experience. And that's when a lot of expulsions that are happening is for the safety of the other children if they don't have the support systems.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That totally makes
sense.
Can
I add to that, Carrie, a little bit? This is Leslie. Yeah, and I, work with providers for a long time, and I wanted to bring in the aspect of what the woman just said about safety. There's another layer to this, and the fact that you can be held liable on the licensing side for injuries, like you're not, supervising the children.
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah, so I wanted to add that. Yeah. I wanted to add that because then you have people preemptively. They see a smaller behavior that's elevated because that then goes on your portal. I've seen a lot of stories where people are afraid to do things, or the hotline is going to be called on them. And so I think there's another part of where's licensing going to fall in this conversation as well, and what is their expectation, setting to this. I just want to put that.
Right. So we might see a bias in this research of what increases the likelihood, but it's because providers are trying to anticipate.
Right.
Don't want that liability. So then we might see bias, what we see as bias, but it's actually a negotiation of, of these kinds of, I'm trying to preempt a problem because I don't want a problem with licensing or a report on the hotline or a parent complaint. Right. And I do think we want to think, you know, the rules conversation will be probably pretty narrow, but I think these conversations are helpful as we think about implementation and where we can think about other supports that states are trying to add for some of these contexts. So I think hearing about licensing is great, hearing about the idea of when can extra staff people be added, hearing the idea of like supports in talking with parents. Like I've heard all kinds of ideas that might not exactly end up in rules, but should be part of the conversation around implementation and when resources become available. What are other strategies that you guys are seeing?
And one more thing, Carrie, to the lovely thought of having extra staff when people can't get minimum staff, they can't stay in ratio. I mean, so again, I just had to say that out loud because it's just not a reality and it's so far away. We'd love to have that, but people are just trying to find regular substitutes so they can take a day off. And so, I mean, I just want to say that I know everyone probably knows that that's true, but I have to say it out loud.
No, I'm glad you said it out loud, right? Because it was an issue before the pandemic and now just being staffed or having substitutes. I think other lessons learned in the pandemic that I saw in other states who reduced group size, that other states that have expulsion and suspension prevention programs got less calls for certain kinds of cases. So like the description that one of you shared about having a child in a smaller group size just meant that behaviors were easier and better, and that we might just have a certain percentage of children that need to be in smaller group size. And so as a system, how do we start to think about that, even if we don't immediately have the resources for it? So it was interesting, as much as maybe some calls went up for the experience of trauma, some kinds of calls during the pandemic in smaller group sizes went down. And so I think children are always trying to teach us something, right? about how well our systems and supports are working.
I just want to acknowledge that we are 4 minutes away from our 3 o'clock end time, and this was just really important for us to all go over. So Carrie, if you want to slide us into the next steps, or if there's any last words that you want to make.
Yeah, why don't we do next steps, and then I can stay on the line if there's any other comments or people want to ask questions past 3, but not keep the group past 3. So I think what we wanted to just share with you is that our plan is to obviously not take the rule set all at once. We want to do it, review it section by section and have some of these in-depth conversations that you've just kicked off for us today. So Remy, if you go to the next slide, what we would like to do at meeting 2, and we thought we would send you a handout that pulls out just these sections from the rule set so it's easy for you to know exactly what to look for our next meeting, is we want to look at the purpose statement of the suspension and expulsion prevention program and how it's currently worded in the draft rules, what it means to become eligible to be a regional service provider for the infant and early childhood mental health consultation part of the program. And then we want to start the definition works, and we want to start at the ones that probably are very critical about how are defined. So that would be your input on suspension, expulsion, soft expulsion, exclusionary practices. And then on meeting 3, we'll do the rest of the definitions. And then on meeting 4, we'll talk about the requirements. But if we don't have your input on the definitions first, then it's hard to talk about the ramifications on the requirements for the providers. So that's the order of work that we'll do. So Karina is going to share a work cell phone number. So if you want to text questions or requests to her, you can. And I'll put my email address in. And so if you want to email questions or requests, you can do that. And we'll get materials out for you for our next meeting, which I think Remy on the last slide reminds us that it's on Friday, May 20th from 10 a.m. to noon.
Thank you, Carrie. And I dropped my email and work phone in the chat for folks to save, and we can also go ahead and send this out as a follow-up. Just want to make sure that you all know that we're available for you to reach out with any questions or even feedback about how we can move forward with these conversations. If folks need to hop off, please do. But I know, Carrie, you said that you had a few minutes to answer any pressing questions if folks had those.
I was so excited about our conversations that we started today and really looking forward to the 20th. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you. I see a question in the chat for you, Carrie. Will rule sets be different, or maybe Remy, different or modified by types of childcare, RFCC, school-based?
That's a really good question, Jennifer. Right now, these rules as written are going to be universal for providers, and we're doing an open, I guess, like we're starting to look at our full childcare rule set in order to do like kind of an overhaul revision that teams that I'm not on are working on right now. And we're still not at the point in the process where we're ready to start like doing the rule language and stuff like that. But there will be an opportunity to move into that rule space at some point. And we haven't figured out whether or not we're going to take that opportunity. So I'm not going to say no, I'm not going to say yes. I'm going to say right now we have universal rules and that's all we know. So once again, this is it's a new process for all of us. This is a new program. We don't really have a lot of guidance on it. So it's really difficult to see what's going to happen next. So I think that this rule advisory committee and then all of the engagement that we're doing internally and externally will help inform what kind of additional rules we work on with these universal rules. So kind of a non-answer. So sorry about that.
That's okay. I know that, one size doesn't fit all, and like a registered family has like a limited number of kids and they can't always afford to have somebody come in, just provide support, and we don't have a pool. I'm in Eastern Oregon. We can barely, find enough providers, let alone a pool to come in to support. And then they can't pay for it. And then I'm with Child Care Resource and Referral. So we're providing trainings, but we don't have enough of us to go around. And so I'm sitting here, I'm interested in how this is going to play out.
Yes,
totally.
I am as well, because I can't see how our universal rules would be able to equitably apply to each setting. A school system have much more staff, much more room and resources available versus a CF or even RF or even a CC. Not only that, the rules are different around when they're saying substitute pools. Well, a substitute has to have worked in a CF for 60 hours prior to being an actual substitute. Who's going to fund that so that CF provider can actually go do training, so that CF provider can be off or whatever the things. All of that comes into play, and the resources that I'm hoping that it's going to have to be there as well to support all of these things. Otherwise, we may run RFs and CFs out there, running scared with their tails between their legs, and that's not what we want to do.
Right.
No.
Well, and I'm just thinking with the RFs, they're not going to take children if they know that there's a behavior or there's a concern, because then they're not going to take them in the program if they can't, not necessarily, get rid of them, but if they can't move them to a better situation, if they're being punished for moving them or punished for saying, this is not the right setting, let me help you find someplace, they're just not going to take the kids at all.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I'm actually looking up as we're talking, I'm looking up specifically because I can't remember off the top of my head in statute which child care providers are going to be specifically covered by these rules. So let me look and try to find it. And I will come back with that information in just a second. And Carrie, if you want me to start sharing slides again, if for any reason, let me know.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just looking at the chat, hoping someone else could define Oregon's abbreviations for different kinds of childcare.
I'll take a quick run at it. So a registered family, which is, since we're getting these two terms, registered family and certified family. Yeah, registered is 10 children and under in the childcare is being provided in a person's home. And then certified family, there's a little bit more requirements around it and being able to serve up to 16 children also in someone's home, but sometimes we have certified family programs run in multiple homes with the same owner. So it's a little bit more like moving towards a center-based type situation. And then childcare or CC is the childcare center, the typical thing that you might see where they're broken up by age groups. What you see in registered family and certified family is more mixed age groups, but as you get into certified family, they can be split into smaller subgroups, and then childcare centers are those typical classroom settings. I hope that helps a little bit, Ashley.
But I think you're right. Yes, it does. Thank you. The resources for support and what it means to roll out the support system now. And then we do know that in 3 years, when you guys talk about eliminating suspension and expulsion, what does it mean by provider type and what that looks like will be a very in-depth conversation. But as you guys think about who will call for support, how supports will be distributed are definitely things on the mind. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time today, and thank you for staying late.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Carrie.